Before this video starts, I want to quickly mention that this was initially a 1 hour video, but what I've done is I've decided to split it up into 3 separate parts. That way it's a little bit more digestible to watch and it's a little bit more easier so that you don't have to focus for over an hour. The following videos after that will pretty much continue on from where it left off. So enjoy the video. Hello and welcome back, this is ProTaleDev. What we're doing today is we're looking at the last bit of Turtle Trial, the boss fight, and then the DLCs. I've had to re-record this, unfortunately, because the data was, the previous recording, I've had a lot of issues with it, and I've not been able to really get it uploaded, so what I've done is I'm now re-recording the whole thing. Now, where I left off last time, we'd looked at all the previous scripts that were tied to this main trial, the Ocean Path trial, and kind of the main game. And the boss fight was one of the last DLC aspects, the part of the combat update, the Bite Back update, which is its official name. And this was one of the biggest scripts and the last scripts that I did that required a lot of coding. The DLCs kind of built off the previous codes from what I've done in the main trial, so there wasn't a whole lot of needed code that was added. Like, this is also a look back on this game and kind of how my coding experience was for me as well. Personally, I can look back at it maybe in a few years and really see how I've really improved, and I can already see my improvements with the Dungeon Tycoon game that I'm working on. So first of all, we're in a brand new save, brand new world, so I've got nothing that's unlocked, nothing that's here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to live just set all of my data so that we are ready for the boss fight. The easy thing for me to do is to just set my player score. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give myself tons and tons of points, absolutely tons, and then make sure that I can unlock them, of course, and then, I don't know, give myself a ridiculous amount of well, I don't really need that much, so I'll just give myself 8 of each food ball, and then we'll do the boss fight, go through it, and experience everything. Of course, we need our objectives to be completed. It's been a while since I can remember how many needed to be done, but I think it's 18 before the boss fight unlocks, so that's what we'll do. Before that though, I'm just going to continue, unlock all of our basic upgrades. So I'll unlock all of these straight away. And this will allow us to get some of these achievements popping up, which was a part of the objectives. I've already covered that in, I believe, the last video. So unlocking all of these, and this will allow us to be able to do the boss fight a lot easier. Once we've done all these, we should get that achievement, and this should unlock some of the objectives, as you can see. We can't get the no stone unturned is the final goal that we need to achieve in order to be able to end the game. I'm going to go over the code once I've shown this gameplay. So let's first of all do a quick save and quickly pause, and then let's have a look at our objectives. So here we are. Let's try and complete some of them. So if I quickly go into maximize once again, what we can do is we can have a quick look. And here we go, our objectives are complete. Now we just need the King of the Sea and Free from the Past, and that will complete the No Stone Unturned. So now we can officially do the boss battle. We should have plenty of food now, so if I quickly just scroll through, you can see our food balls at the bottom left changing. We got them, we got 8 out of 12, and we could do with some food, so let's quickly do that so we can use that in the fight as well. So let's just go into our player score and add a bunch of squid is probably the best one for food, so we'll just add a ton of squid. Absolutely ridiculous amounts of squid. Okay, we're ready to go for the boss battle. So I'm just going to do a quick cut until I get there and defeat the orca. But so in order to start this boss battle, you actually have to defeat the orca that's in the deep ocean biome. Once you get him low health, he'll try and escape, and then you follow him into a whirlpool. It'll come up with some UI to try and access the boss battle. Obviously, if you didn't do enough objectives, it'll cancel, restart, and you'll have to defeat him again. Otherwise, you just go straight into the boss battle. So I'm going to cut now to that. Okay, so now the boss battle is there. I can now go into the fight. So once I've entered the boss battle, and after defeating that orc, you'll end up in this section right here. Now, it is nighttime at the moment, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just wait until it's getting closer to daytime, and then I'll start the fight. Okay, so it's now daytime, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly eat before I enter the boss battle, because I won't have a whole lot of time to be able to eat in the fight. I can only eat when the orc boss is vulnerable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the damage ball for most of it just to speed the boss fight up, and I'll be using a break ball towards the end when it gets to the really difficult section of the fight. So this biome is called the Lost Waters. You'll head through here, this little ravine section, and it'll push you straight into the boss fight. It'll start immediately once you enter this area. There we go, the health is on the right, and a little bit of instructions at the bottom. It's just a mention to survive the fight. It's really just to tell you that the fight has started, and that you will be able to damage the orca during the time when they're vulnerable. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate the second I see the orca, I'm going to activate the damage ball once I see its health go yellow. That means it's vulnerable. And when it is vulnerable, what I'll be able to do is just keep attacking. Essentially this has several stages. Oh, here we go. So this does have several stages, and it just starts off as being really simple, and then it will get very, very difficult, and there's so many times where I have died at the very end. There we go. So if I just quickly start attacking now, this is where it's vulnerable. I should be able to get it again. Oh, not quite. So I was a little bit late there. Usually you can get maybe 2 bites off before you have to, before the orca mother runs away. So I'll just keep going through this fight, and hopefully it doesn't take too long. So there we go, that's another bite. Can I get another one off? I don't think I might be able to. With each section this gets harder and harder, and now we're on the final section. So, oh, there we go. There. There. And we could do with the break ball now. Of course we're still using the cooldown. So I might be able to get another bite off. I can. Oh, almost there. Almost there. I've watched a few people test this boss fight out, and they've really struggled with it. They failed quite a few times, but they do eventually succeed. So I know that it is a perfectly well done boss fight. Lots of different phases. Visually, it's not crazy visually good. However, it's still okay. Let's do a break ball before we end the fight. And that was it. We did it. We completed King of the Sea. So what will happen is a quick cutscene will happen here, and the orca will die, the orca mother, and this magic effect will occur. And this ties in with the story and the lore. This magic circle will slowly go in, and it'll reveal this machine. This magic machine, which is controls a lot of what happens here, reason your abilities work and things. It's all tied into the lore. So a shockwave occurs, which will causes fear. Luckily I've managed to avoid the fear with some of the upgrades, and what I can do now is once I exit this area through here, I can teleport. So now I can teleport home and go to E3 as instructed at the bottom, because some rocks might have been dislodged, and I can exit into and complete the game. Let's do a quick save right here. And what I can do is I can say goodbye. So obviously I've got all this stuff here that I'm just going to quickly grab him. And I can now exit and complete the game. So let's go and do that. Let's also use a immunity ball if that actually recovers quick enough. We can also sleep as well, so let's sleep the night away so that we can just go and complete the game in daylight. So let's do this, let's sleep, skip the night, and wait until our ball has recovered, our food ball. It's almost there. Okay, let's quickly save now that it's recovered. We'll activate that because there are some sharks that could kill you at the end here. We're not completed yet. What we can do is we can head back home. What I'm also going to show off here is the objectives. So now all objectives should be completed, which they are. And of course we have all our lore we could listen to. And let's go and finish this completely. Let's activate a immune ball just so we can get to the end. So this is E3, so we know that we need to go back to the right. These guys do a ton of damage still, obviously. They're still really dangerous. And I believe this is it. So I believe this is the exit to the end cutscene. I'm just going to boost as well, just to get through it quicker. And once we're down here, we'll officially have triggered the end cutscene. Now, while the screen is all blue, what will happen is it'll roll the credits. We'll go through, it's not too long, the credits, because only I've worked on it, so it's not too bad. But essentially it just congratulates you on completing the main campaign for the Turtle Trial, and just quick credits to kind of the things I used. Again, I did all the pixel art and obviously the game and stuff, but there was a lot of royalty-free songs that were free to use, as well as some credits to you, big thanks for playing it. And for people who have got this far. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to show the code for this, and then I'll look at the DLC. Now this video is going to be quite long because I've never really shown boss fight off. I felt like it was worth showing. And so there we go. We get the end section, which is reminiscent of the menu. Okay, and with that, what we're going to do is let's look at the coding for this. So this project is, as mentioned a few times now, let's quickly pause that, we can come back to it in a minute. As mentioned a few times, bring this on my other screen, this project is over 20,000 lines of code, and this was a big script on its own, so we got over 1,012 lines. We'll just call it that, and essentially what this is it's controlling the entire boss fight, everything that we just went through. Now there are lots of little scripts tagged on to the boss itself, and a lot of animation that controls a lot of its behaviour, but its states of battle and all of the different effects and spawning is all controlled in this script, so the orc battle. Now to start off from the top, there's a lot of references to a lot of things, a lot of stage controls and states, and a lot of individual UI controls. So the first scripts that really trigger are the end check. Sorry, the first scripts that actually trigger are the entrance and the start fight button, the close button, and these are the UIs for specifically detecting when the so when the objectives are completed, they'll trigger a certain boolean here, which determines if a UI should be activated or not when you defeat the orca. That's at the deep ocean, so that once you defeat that guy, it'll detect the objectives and see if they're completed, and then this UI will be determined and triggered if it should be true or false, whether you should be able to go in. Now once these are triggered and once these are detected and it's determined that you can go into the fight, you're teleported, you go straight into the ravine, the Lost Waters, and that means that you now start the fight. Now the player has a trigger on them in the player movement. It has a trigger which if what triggers the specific boss fight, but the boss fight trigger isn't enabled until these occur. So once that happens, we then move on to the actual fight itself. Now, constantly through the update script, we're detecting if the player is dead, if the fight, again, if it's started or not, whether it's true, and what kind of this also determines what stages of health they're at. So if the player enters a different stage of health, then the battle state is changed by a specific number, and that determines this section here, which is randomly chooses a attack. So every now and again it will go through the state depending on if the a bool is specifically activated for the attack. So if it's true or false, once it sets to false, it will trigger an attack, and then it sets to true until it's disabled again, and it'll choose a random attack. Now if we just go at battle stage 1, we can see that this has the whirlpool attack tutorial. These are all the tutorial ones. It'll choose that random one of those, and it kind of is the same thing all the way through. So with each battle state, it will choose a specific new attack, and these are determined by their own functions, which is their difficulty. And if we look at their functions specifically, we have them right here. So right here we have instantiate a whirlpool clone, which is a already pre-built whirlpool game object. It's a prefab that has all that information tied into it. And we also have the same thing for the tutorial, which has built in the waves. So what waves and what spawners should spawn for the specific little baby orcas that attack you. We also have the same thing for the battle sweep, which is when the orca tail is out of the water and it attacks you, which later on in, let's say, a later version, a very hard version, will start spawning this much harder aspect, which spawns the waves. So essentially it's a bunch of instantiates for prefabs that are pre-built. It just brings them in and what health, and it's the health that determines what the battle state should be. So it's very simple, very straightforward, but it's got a lot of complicated components to it. So here we have the boss damage. I wasn't going to show much of other scripts because there's so many, but just to quickly skim over it, we have the orca chase for the individual enemies. We have the battle begins, which triggers different states of animation. The same with these side attacks. These are all on their individual code aspects. Their individual game objects that control those things. Even the surface sound for the orca is also controlling its own script, as well as the orca movements. So these are just some of the scripts that control some of the other aspects of the boss battle. So there's a lot more to it than just this script. And then once we go into that, we have things like the cutscenes, so the intro shadow that you see at the very beginning, that's controlled in here, just before the first state. We have the destroying of the entrance, which is triggered, the closing of the unique message, damage orca states ends, so just after they become vulnerable, which is a big part of this fight is when they become vulnerable. So after each battle, after each attack is successful and finishes its animation, what will happen is it will trigger this, which is become vulnerable pool, tail or spawn, and depending on what stage it will trigger a different vulnerability. And this means that we can have different times for vulnerability to be available, and as well as different aspects of when things can be triggered. So the bite isn't able to be triggered unless it's in the vulnerability state. Just as an example of what I do in this vulnerability aspect, but also it ends other previous stages. So every time a vulnerability is triggered, it ends a current attack. Apart from these spawning waves, I kind of liked that is there for some waves to try and put pressure on so the player can't just heal every time it's vulnerable. But you can heal during that vulnerability stage, which is also another aspect of having this. Then we have the very hard, which is much more complicated, and it triggers all these end sections. Then we have the end cutscene. This is specifically after the orca, you've gotten the health below 0. The different ones of these will trigger, and these are all timed. So whether the bite is available as well as the disable. So we have the disaster cutscene will play after the objective is being completed, and this triggers after the cutscene is completed. So after you defeat the boss, it'll trigger a boss, adding that to your objectives, completion, and the health will disappear. It'll trigger some of these animations, so the shockwave, and it'll ultimately end the game. And this is a very long script, but ultimately it's very simple. So to summarize, we have the battle states, which are triggered based on health. When the health reaches 0, it triggers the end cutscene section. Throughout the boss fight, you have these different attacks that are randomized, and depending on what the state is, will determine its difficulty. And the different vulnerability will be activated every time the attack ends. Once the vulnerability is run out, then we resume back to a battle state that is on based on the health. So that's to summarize. Now, let's go over to the DLCs. Now, I didn't really cover the DLCs much on this channel, partly because the main game was really what this series was about. However, let's look at the DLCs now. As mentioned at the very beginning of this video, the coding is very similar to the previous game. So a lot of the objectives are now been turned into goals. They're just different, but they're the same. So what I mean by that is that the way I've coded them is the same, but their overall objective is different. To show this, let's quickly look at the updates section that's in this game, and you'll see all the different updates that we had. So we had the hotfix after the game released, as well as the ready upgrades, the minor fix, the bite back, the combat fix, the balance fix, the Orca boss fix, and then the frozen chains. Now, you can go into this game and see this page for yourself. I had that in because people wanted it. Or you could just very well, not worry about it as much. It's online as well, so you can check this out whenever you want. But essentially, so I'm not going to go over them. Essentially, the big update that I want to look at is the frozen chains, because that added an entirely new addition to the game. A lot of these were either fixes or just minor adds. Apart from the ready upgrade and the bite back update. The bite back update added a ton of stuff like the food balls and the crafting and the boss fight and things like that, and a lot of fixes. And the upgrades added a ton of abilities. But the Frozen Chains was actually a replacement for a previous DLC that was included. That was the Scrooge update, so the Scrooge Redemption, which was added for a Christmas game jam that I worked on for the Yoscast game jam, I believe, and it was to do with Scrooge Redemption, but as a turtle. And essentially that map was so broken that I removed it from this game and then brought it in as a brand new update, the Frozen Chains, completely revamped it. So if you go into the trials and you go into Frozen Chains, I'll show you a very quick brief look at it. Essentially, you have 40 days and the game will end no matter what. So after the 40th day, you'll enter into a deep freeze, which will kill you, and it will restart the game over. What you have to do is you have to essentially complete all of the charity events and all the objectives and requests in order to complete the game. So let's quickly go into this. Now it says it here as one of the tips before you load that the game you have to complete 5 ghostly missions before the 40th day. To figure out what these ghostly missions are, you actually have to find the ghosts. And there's also these, you can also donate to charity. Now at the very bottom here we have a message from our ghost, which is essentially just introducing you to what's happened. You're stuck, you can, it's just requesting you to go and help these ghosts that are lost. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to this section right here. While this is playing in the background, let's actually close that. Now, a lot of the aspects of this game are the same, so you still have the food balls, so if I just scroll through, you can see them on the bottom left. There are some new ones, so you have the warm-up ball, as well as the freeze ball and the burnout ball. These have new effects and new abilities, and they've replaced a few of the other ones that were kind of overpowered. Now that the ghost has stopped talking, what we're going to do is we're going to go on here, and you can see these are some upgrades from the previous game that have been included. Do the same thing, but you don't have as many overpowered abilities, so unfortunately it's going to be a lot harder than the previous one, but you do have some of your basic abilities back and some upgrades. Now let's close this off, and as you can see at the bottom right, instead of fear we have freeze. So what's happening is we're freezing on land. What you want to do is you actually want to head into the water because it's a little bit better. But the water is very, very cold. Sorry, that's the other way around. It's been a while since I've played, but so the water is actually freezing, and you actually need to get on land in order to survive the freeze. In here, you'll actually see a bunch of new enemies. So you'll see some ghosts that are deadly ghosts that are around. You'll also see a bunch of new biomes, tons of new biomes, in fact, and yeah, a bunch of different types of enemies. You've also got a bunch of different food sources that you can interact with. So I believe you have like these fire berries that you can eat, which warm you up and are essentially a new resource, as well as like these special shrimp as well that you can go and eat, and different kind of things like that. So obviously right here you got this bush, you can go up to it and eat it, go and pick it up, and there we go, we got one there. And what we can do is we can go and this kind of works the same way. Now I'm going to quickly pause this because we can do a quick save if we want, but I'm going to pause it and just show the map in its entirety. If we quickly go to world, you'll see these different sections that I've got activated currently, and the player can't see these, but I've just got them activated just for you. And what you've got is these separate zones right here. So if I quickly get rid of our canvas so you can see it better, you'll see our different sections. So you have the main greens, so this is our main land where you start, and then you can venture off into these sections right here. So what we have is the snowy tundra islands, and then we have the moving island platforms and the icy, some of the icy plains, as well as a mix of this section right here. Then we zoom out even further, we have the cold empties, so this is going to be a really hard section. The player needs balls to be able to trot across some of these areas, otherwise they'll just freeze. And then up here we have the build-up ice, which is light. So this is like miniature platforms the player has to push out the way. This has its own challenges because you could end up getting stuck in some of these sections by enemies, and so you need to be able to have these warm balls to be able to get rid of some of them. Over here we have the build-up ice thick, so this is the really thick section, as well as the crystal fields where you got to head up here to a old power station that ties into the first campaign. And there's a lot of Easter eggs in this that the player can discover. You have the Rocky Mounts, the Winter Country, and the Lost Facility, and the Dead Zones. The Dead Zones will kill you, and then the Metal Graveyard. So let's go and quickly explore some of these. I know this video is getting very long, however I've never really gone over some of this DLC at all, so I think it would be good to actually discover some of these. Let's quickly get on the player second, and let's move them around. So right now we're on this island down here. And what we can do is we can move the player around a little bit, maybe just press that. Let's go into our... Now one of these enemies is in fact these little miniature orcas which we fought in the previous game. We have them also right here. We also have, hopefully I can find a ghost to show you one of them. I believe it's up here, the first ghost that you discover. So let's just quickly do this, and let's also make sure our canvas is on and resume. Now back at the camp there is hints at where these ghosts are. It does sort of tell you roughly where they are, and you can kind of, if I play this legitly, you would be able to find them, hopefully. At the moment I'm just sort of looking around to see if I can find one. And that's part of the struggle of this one, is to find these ghosts that are hidden away. There's a lot of new islands and a lot of new aspects to these sections that really make it dangerous. So the further north you go, the more the cold will set in and be more and more dangerous. So getting on land is really crucial. One of these balls, the burnout ball, is really going to be crucial to surviving in these sections, and you'll need a lot of the new ingredients to survive. If I go quickly even further, essentially you'll see these types of island. These are the moving island platforms that you have right here. If I quickly bring these round to these sections, like this one for example, you'll kind of see the kind of effect. This was one of my favorite kind of islands as well that I built. It has this really unique ice effect on it. let's keep moving around and showing you. So the next biome is the cold empty. Really just these small little platforms that you push around, and really you can't get any kind of help from here, so it's really going to be difficult. It gets more and more snowy as well. So you do have these little small platforms that you can get on, which does have like green, but you can see how slow I am now in the winter as it gets colder further up, how I slowly move on land. And if I keep going further up to the light build-up section, hold on, I'm almost there, here it is. When I come up to this section here, you'll see these little sections of ice that I have to push around. Very, very difficult to push around, can cause me to die definitely with enemies. So as I push them, you'll see all of them pop out, which gives a cool effect. You can work your way through these. If you have the boost, it's much easier to work through this. But essentially, after you've worked your way through all these little ice sections, what you can do is you'll end up in the winter country. The winter country is essentially a massive continent with lots of different sort of interconnected islands. And once you progress through all of these, you'll do encounter unique specific enemies. So for example, this is a ghost, which is going to be very dangerous if it hits me. And it's kind of like, oh come on, oh god, that was close. So the enemies in this are much more deadly and much more dangerous, and they're meant to be that way in the first place. They're just one of the enemies you'll probably face. Over here we have the facility section, which if I keep working up over here, you'll see this whole underground facility that you can actually enter. Let's quickly move over to the metal graveyard, and that's a graveyard full of, I believe, ships that are actually hidden. And then you also have over here the build up thick, which are these like crystal island sections. These are an area full of just crystals that pop out, and you can work your way through this sort of ridge area into a specific zone full of this other section where you can complete another area, which is the power station. Also, you have the dead zone as well, which you can respawn at and come back to here. Okay, so let's come out. So this is all the code essentially in all of the game. I never really shown that DLC, so I felt like I had to show it. If I go into scripts, if I go into the winter section of Christmas and then look at the scripts in here, you'll see that I have all of the very basic scripts handled in here. You have the ghost missions, which are the very new aspect to it, and they're controlled in here as well. But ultimately the code is very, very similar, and so I don't really think there's any need to go over it. Just like the trade ice, so you can trade for food and for resources, it's the same thing with the exchange script. The goals for rewards and the goal ice is essentially the objective script. Everything is very, very similar, and the crafting and everything, so I won't go over it. Ultimately, this has been an amazing series to work on, and Total Trial was my first official game that I released, so it holds really close to my heart. It's a really great experience that this game gave me, and now working on Dungeon Farm Tycoon, which is another big game I'm working on. This is kind of I can see a lot of improvements that I've made and a lot of changes I've really grown as a coder from that. Looking back at this game as well. I know this has been a really long video, but it's also quite important one to show off. I'm really happy with how things ended up. This is the last video I'll be doing on Turtle Trial, so I won't be looking at this game anymore. I'll be just moving on now to any future games, and I won't be doing any kind of big breakdowns like this. So this has been ProTaleDev, and I'll see you next time.